You're listening to the RC Executive Lounge Podcast, the show where healthcare revenue leaders share real-world strategies, hard-earned lessons, and bold ideas shaping the future of revenue cycle. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not constitute endorsement of any specific product or solution.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RC Executive Lounge Podcast series. I'm your host, Praveen, and I'm very excited that you're all joining here today with a guest with whom I've been looking forward to having this conversation for quite a while now. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Kim Scaccia, Vice President of Revenue Cycle at TriHealth, to the RC Executive Lounge. Kim is a highly respected revenue cycle leader with a very rare blend of hands-on operational leadership and deep management consulting experience. Across her career, she has consistently helped health systems elevate financial performance while building strong, engaged teams and sustainable operating models. Prior to joining TriHealth, Kim held a senior leadership role at Mercy Health, where she assumed full ownership of the end-to-end revenue cycle across a vertically integrated, multi-hospital, multi-practice health system. Under her leadership, the team achieved significant improvements, including major reductions in AR days and denials, record-setting cash collections, and improved staff engagement, all while navigating the operational complexity of the COVID era and a shift to hybrid work. Earlier in her career, Kim served in leadership roles at KPMG and Baker Tilly, where she partnered with healthcare executives across the country to redesign revenue cycle operations, strengthen analytics and performance management, and drive large-scale transformation initiatives. That consulting foundation continues to shape her approach today, combining data-driven decision-making with practical execution. Kim is also deeply engaged in the broader healthcare finance community. She served from 2023 to 2025 on the HFMA National Advisory Council and is currently a member of the Ohio chapter of HFMA, where she brings a very strong perspective on payer relations, revenue integrity, and change leadership in an increasingly complex environment. We are very excited to have Kim join us today to share her insights on leading revenue cycle through change, building high-performing teams, and using analytics and partnerships to drive meaningful, lasting results. Kim, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to the RC Executive Lounge.
Thanks, Praveen. I'm very, very honored to be here.
And I know we've been in conversations for a while, so we are even more excited that you're able to join us, given your transition and everything. So glad to have you on the show today.
I'm so glad we finally were able to make this work. I know it's been a challenge to get our calendars in sync.
Understandably so. Leaders are always super busy, and we have to make sure that the calendars line up. So I'm glad it did. With that, let's dive in. Now, with so many pressures on finance and RCM teams today, from payer delays to staffing gaps and so much other things going on from a regulatory perspective, how do you go about setting your top strategic priorities when you think ahead for the next 12 months, the next 3 years, and the next 5 years?
Well, honestly, with the amount of pressure on finance and revenue cycle teams right now, I found that the only way to set meaningful priorities is to stay very disciplined and grounded in impact. So first, anchor everything to enterprise risk and value, right? What most directly protects revenue, cash flow, and patient trust. Payer delays, denials, staffing gaps, they all show up differently across the organization. So we focus on the few pressure points where improvements will move the needle to the next most valuable opportunity, whether it's financial clearance, denial prevention, or reducing avoidable write-offs. Second, I'm very intentional about sequencing, not just selecting priorities. In today's environments, you can't do everything at once. I wish we could. We prioritize initiatives that strengthen the foundation, the core workflows, the accountability, the data transparency, because without those in place, even those high ROI projects struggle to scale and sustain. Third, right, capacity matters. As just as much as strategy, capacity is really important. Staffing gaps force us to make hard choices. We evaluate priorities through a do more with less lens.
Yeah.
Can this be automated? Can it be standardized? Is the work aligned to the right role? Where are we burning out those highly skilled staff on like manual, low value tasks? If an initiative increases complexity without relieving pressure on the teams, then it's usually a no, or at least a not now.
Yeah.
You know, we have to continue to balance ROI additionally with that regulatory and compliance reality. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But some initiatives are just a must do. So when we think about those strategic priorities, sometimes that is the compliance and the regulatory is just going to trump everything else, right? But really at the top of everything we do strategically, relentless focus and clear communication, right? Once the priorities are set, and we have to be explicit about what we are not working on. You know, clarity builds trust with teams and keeps leadership aligned, especially when conditions change, which they do every day in finance and revenue cycle. At the end of the day, the strategic priorities are about protecting revenue, supporting our people, and ensuring we're positioned to adapt and excel, not just survive, right?
Yeah, totally makes sense. So when you're prioritizing this way, obviously in a complex RCM environment, your team members are going to bring 20, 50 initiatives every year during prioritization or every quarter, right? And as a leader, you're often put in a situation to make some really tough choices. Can you maybe share an example where you had to say no to a really good initiative, even though you really wanted to do it, but because of time constraints or bandwidth constraints, you had to say no in favor of something even more critical?
Absolutely. I mean, it's happening right now. I mean, very simply, transparency, pricing transparency, the new rules and regulations, all the things that we have to do from a transparency perspective. I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but with government regulations the way they are in healthcare, we just have to prioritize some of those things. So the machine readable formats published on websites for organizations provide little or no ROI for us. There's nothing that helps us in that realm.
Yeah.
They help government, they help payers to test and review reimbursement markets. And unfortunately, with the new regulations, this particular project for transparency this year has had to bump some other priorities into fall time period, you know, and it's really, it's kind of the nature of the beast sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, regulatory projects also have like a fixed timeline associated with it. So you are kind of put in a situation where you have to address them. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, when we go to events, be it HFMA, MGMA, wherever, there are two or three topics that keep coming back, right? One is denial prevention, second is patient financing, third is financial assistance. Where do these fit in a strategic roadmap in your organization, be it in your previous organization or a current organization?
Yeah, so all three are high priorities for us this year. So patient financing, in my opinion, is one of the most challenging areas on the roadmap this year. Recourse programs are becoming more common across the industry, but in my experience at my last organization, and especially here, they often come with a significant cost to patient trust and satisfaction. In fact, here we recently exited a recourse program altogether because of not only the dissatisfaction, but the operational challenges that it created. And unfortunately, when you remove a recourse program as an option, the alternatives aren't easy. You're left balancing, you know, external early out vendors, traditional collections, internal staffing, or at the very far end of it, legal action against patients, which is both unpopular and misaligned with patient-centered care.
Yeah.
So layer onto that the evolving regulatory environment, particularly guidance around consumer financial protections in healthcare debt, and it becomes clear that really there's no simple solution to patient financing. Our focus has to be thoughtful, compliant, aligned with both our financial stewardship and our financial experience. So for us on the patient financing front, it's all about education, all about upfront trying to help patients understand that for insured patients, right, the amount that they pay us is set by their payer, right? And it's kind of a nice transition into the second part of your question, right? So when we think about denial prevention and things like that, I believe we can change the game. I believe that we in Revenue Cycle can fundamentally change the game in denial prevention. I describe denials in industry or in events as the noise, right? Denials are typically a symptom of one of two things: a broken revenue cycle process or payer behaviors that result in delays, right? So too often organizations stay stuck in that reactive posture, right? Chasing denials after the fact. Our strategy over the next 18 months is to try to shift upstream, right? Fix the root cause issues, partner more closely with managed care to improve contracts, service level expectations, and of course, I'm sure we'll get into this today, leveraging AI, not just to work denials faster, right? We're there in a lot of places, but how do we make it so that we are being more predictive, right? Predict the denials before they happen rather than building large teams to clean them up afterwards.
Yep, that totally makes sense. With that, let's take a short break. When we come back, we are going to be talking to Kim about an initiative that her organization led. What was the impact? What were the challenges they were solving for? Please stay tuned.
When care feels out of reach, patients walk away. Hospitals are left with denied claims and money they cannot collect. RCHQ's Agentic AI cuts claim denials and helps patients set up payment plans that fit their budget, while connecting them to assistance programs like Charity Care and Medicare. Seamlessly integrates with your existing RCM systems with no coding required. Empower patients, protect revenue, increase cash flow. RCHQ, every patient's trusted AI financial assistant.
Welcome back. Kim, let's dive right in. As we talked about, I would love to dive into a recent initiative that you and your organization led. What challenges were you solving for?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about my prior organization at Mercy, because at TriHealth, we have so many things going on and we're still in mid-flight with a lot of them. So let's talk about a prior initiative that I led over at Mercy Health. When we first got to a place of understanding that we needed automation and assistance in our physician coding space, we decided to go with a computer-assisted and autonomous coding solution. This is very scary for a lot of organizations, especially for a lot of coders, right? Because a lot of people think, well, we're going to put in technology and I'm going to lose a job. It's the same with the AI world that's out there today. What a lot of folks don't realize is that AI is here to help us move our team members to operate at the top of their skill set. And literally, that's what we saw at my last organization. We brought in a company, we put in a autonomous and assisted coding application. And the problems we were trying to solve was we weren't touching every single charge as it was going out, right? So physician saw the patient, they dropped the code, it went out of the outside and, got paid or not. And then we were in the constant cleanup. By putting in an autonomous solution, it could be doing some of the checking. It could allow those claims to go out, and it could identify things that were missing. And as a byproduct, what we actually saw is we also saw that HCC capture rate was increasing, because with AI in place to read the record, it could churn through more data quickly and then allow us the opportunity to circle back with physicians faster. So not only were we able to see those capture rates increase, but we were also seeing our physician satisfaction going up because now they had more real-time information coming back on a continuous basis. And this is great, a great way to see how technology can truly help an organization do more with less.
Yeah, especially for organizations where data is at scale, obviously AI could do a great job. So that's a great example. Now,
Yes.
when you identified the challenge, how did you go about selecting a solution or a partner? Now, obviously, there is this conflict of build versus buy. How did you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of organizations do this really well. We didn't do like a formal RFP, although a lot of organizations do a formal RFP process. But we did start doing our own research, right? So I was very blessed at my last organization that I had a director who really could see the writing and really understood where we were going. So she was able to get with some of her management team and go out and start doing research and independently talking to other organizations about what are you doing, what works well. And then we started doing demonstration reviews. And really, it came down to putting down on paper pros and cons of each organization that we talked to, each partner or solution that we talked to. What did they do well? What didn't they do well? And thinking of it from the perspective of what are we going to gain and are we going to solve the problem before we looked at what is the cost.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to it at the end of the day, most vendors, when you're looking for a solution or a partner, are going to be pretty comparable. And we were very, very lucky that as we started to go through the process, that's basically what we found. And our last vendor just kind of blew out of the water everybody else from a true solution perspective. And we were really looking for a solution that we're going to solve some problems and grow with us as we continue down that path.
That makes sense. And let's talk about implementation. A project of this scale obviously will have known complexities and unknown complexities, right? So from that perspective, as you and your team are going through implementation, were there any pitfalls, surprises, or lessons that you learned along the way that you'd like to share with our audience?
I don't want to say that there were any real pitfalls. I think in a project of this size, I don't think any of us anticipated the workload that was going to exist on our existing staff. Because it was sort of an unknown of what we were going to be taking on, we did take it in bites, right? What's the old saying? You can't eat the apple in all one bite. And that was definitely true here. And so one of the surprises really for us was really trying to understand how we were going to break it down. And it was sort of a challenge in the beginning, but once we got through that piece of it, we were able to move a lot quicker. I think that for my team that was there at the organization, they did an absolutely fantastic job of being able to raise the yellow flag, right? Of being able to say, hey, we need to take a time out and think about, are we going about this the right way? And when you think about taking on a big project, if you have not created that psychological safe organization, your teams will not be able to feel like they have that voice. And that's really important.
Makes sense. It sounds like two key aspects were having a psychologically safe organization and very close project management, powerful lessons. Could you share the measurable impact from this project? And in general, for a project of this scale, how do you think about tracking success?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to your first question we were talking about how do we find a solution partner? If you're not thinking about how to measure success while you're looking for a partner, you're going to be late in the game. So again, that was one of the things that we started thinking about as we were trying to solve the problem is the partner going to be able to give us a solution where we can track the success? Can we create the KPIs? Do we have a baseline that we can look at? And so that was really important for us as we went through our solutioning. So when I left my last organization, they had already seen a 5% bottom line impact. So that's net cash to the bottom line. And they had already seen their HCC capture rate had already gone up about 6 to 7%.
That's
So as we
amazing.
think about measurable, those are impressive numbers.
Very impressive numbers. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
With that, let's take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Kim about up and coming technologies like Agentic AI and their applications in revenue cycle as well as in broader healthcare. Please stay tuned.
1 in 5 hospital claims is denied. Behind every denial is a patient delaying care and a provider losing cash. With RCHQ's Agentic AI, fewer denials mean faster reimbursement. Patients get payment plans that fit their budget and access to programs like charity care and Medicare. No coding required to make RCHQ work with systems you already use. With RCHQ, you see an instant increase in cash flow.
We are back online. Kim, I want to shift gears into technology. You hear Agentic AI so much in every event. A leader of your caliber, how do you see, or what role do you see Agentic AI playing in revenue cycle when you look at the next 12 months as well as the next 3 to 5 years?
For sure. Yeah, this one is always a fun topic, right? In healthcare, there are few areas that can be truly agentic AI, agentic or fully autonomous, right? Most of what we want to do is a blend of generative, right, creating context, and agentic, right, doing the work. So, for example, take Epic's medical necessity denial functionality, for example. Is it AI? Sure. It's looking at a denial received from the payer. It's reading the medical record to create the appeal. However, that AI still needs to be reviewed by an agent. Does it speed up their job? Absolutely. Now on the coding front, right? So as we think about ambient listening, those could be considered agentic. Doing the work previously required by a physician or a clinician. How wonderful is that? But as you think about where AI plays that role, you always have to remember that only a human can do what no human has done before. So as we think about the true role of AI, it's vast. The challenge that we have today is defining not only the best ROI, but having very clear guardrails around where we use it and how we use it. We're going to see that our employees will be asked to work at the top of that skill set and even probably learn new ways to provide value. Right now, for us, clinical documentation improvement is a huge area. So we're moving coders who used to do the task of coding claims to learning more about how to improve the documentation, because right now we have autonomous coding. So we're ensuring that we're paid appropriately by capturing more and increasing that documentation to show the complexity of the patients that we serve. So it's a complicated, dyad when we look at it, but I think that we're going to see a faster scale and scope of agentic AI in the next 3 to 5 years.
Makes sense. And you mentioned there are a vast number of areas in terms of applications of Agentic AI. Are there specific areas, or maybe you have 1 or 2 use cases in mind specifically where Agentic AI is not doing incremental improvements, but real, like a 10x transformation, in a fundamental shift for either RCM or for broader healthcare? Is there such a use case in your mind?
I think so. Proactive revenue protection versus reactive cleanup. I mean, I mentioned that earlier, right? Revenue cycle is still built around like chasing problems after they happen: denials, underpayment, missed authorizations, documentation gaps, and that's reflected in how much effort we still put into that back end remediation. But where I think AI can shift the game is really by identifying that documentation before it happens, or flagging payer-specific behaviors before they happen, prioritizing work dynamically, right? Identifying dollars at risk, not static work queues. That's where I think AI can help us prevent that revenue loss instead of just accelerating rework or operating model changes.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And outside of Agentic AI, are there other technologies that you and your team are personally watching, specifically either for RCM or for broader healthcare?
Um, it's always interesting to try not to chase the shiny new AI feature, right? Um, it's a lot about how those technologies actually show up in the work. So I think a lot about understanding what we're truly talking about. I hear a lot in the market about, is it agentic? Is it, are we talking about true automation, or is it just reprioritization? And it makes it really difficult. For me personally, in my current role, my highest priority right now is truly thinking about revenue integrity and watching the technologies that could support automated charge reconciliation, AI assistance of missing or inconsistent charges, better integration across departments, right? Looking at HIM, CDI, clinical teams, trying to catch potential opportunities earlier. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about, right, the next single tool, but it's that convergence of AI analytics and workflow embedded directly into your EMR so that it's integrated, and potentially helping your team members that you have.
That makes sense. And one last question for this segment before we move on to the next segment. Is there one metric that Kim obsesses over every morning or every week? This is the first thing you look at in the morning. And if those numbers go down, either because of data issues or because of other reasons, people start getting nervous in the organization. Is there one such metric?
Well, the one metric for me is always cash, right? Cash is king. Cash rules the day. So yeah, I mean, we look at cash every day. Yeah, and it is one of those things that I don't want to say obsess over, but we look at it every day. And but that's your indicator of your health of everything. So revenue cycle is always really challenging because you can't just measure one KPI.
And if you were to, peel the layers of the onion and maybe just go one more layer down, are there like level 2 metrics, maybe 3 to 5 metrics that immediately come to your mind that you think are personally important for an organization?
Oh, that's a tough one. I have to think about that one. I haven't really thought about that one. Because I look at cash, right? I look at my cost to collect because as we talk about revenue cycle metrics and what's leading indicators, if I'm collecting more but my cost is going up, am I being a good steward of my financial resources, right? If I'm a nurse on the floor and I don't have patients, what are they going to do? They're going to tell me to go home for the day. Same with your revenue cycle team. Are we being good financial stewards? So your cost to collect is extraordinarily important. And I always hate the denial metrics, right? Because everybody talks about, oh, what's your denial percentage? I personally prefer to look at my write-off percentage because that is, to me, a better indicator of how we're doing.
Totally makes sense. With that, let's take a short break. When we come back, we are going to be talking to Kim about her leadership philosophy, how she approaches change management, and in general, what would be some advice that she would be willing to give to a fellow leader. Please stay tuned. We'll be back.
Every denied claim is money left on the table. Every missed payment is cash flow you may never see again. RCHQ utilizes Agentic AI to lower denials, set up families with affordable payment plans, and connect patients to affordability assistance programs like Charity Care. Lower denials, expand affordability, and strengthen cash flow. RCHQ makes it possible with no coding required. Visit rchq.com today.
We're back online. Kim, thank you for staying on. Change is really hard, especially in complex RCM environments. RCM environments are inherently extremely complicated, right? So when you are building momentum for change for complex projects across teams, especially when it requires multiple cross-functional teams, how do you think about change management and building momentum?
This is one of my favorite topics for sure. For me, momentum comes from clarity, credibility, and connection. You have to work all three at the same time. So I always start, and especially in my new organization at TriHealth, I start with a unified leadership voice. Change stalls when teams hear different messages from different leaders. So here we've been very intentional about aligning leaders to know what we're changing, why does it matter, what does success look like. We even have a document that's called a know, share, do framework. So this way, when leaders are consistent, teams feel safer leaning into change instead of questioning it. Second, I focus on wins that matter to the front line. So early progress builds belief. Fixing high friction issues, whether it's a broken workflow or unclear expectations, or even just a reporting gap, shows teams that change isn't theoretical. It makes their work easier and proves leadership is listening. Those early wins create pull for the next phase of change. Third, I over communicate the why, not just the what. People in general, they don't resist change. They resist uncertainty. So when we use multiple channels, so like at my organization, we use expanded leadership meetings, department huddles, newsletters, town halls, and we're explaining what's happening and then how it connects to patient care and financial stewardship and what it means to each role throughout the organization. Transparency builds trust, and trust fuels momentum. So I also take time to invest in managers and supervisors as change leaders. Frontline leaders are the difference between a compliance or a commitment, right? We equip them with talking points, with data, forum slides, anything that we can so that their teams can raise concerns. And that way, our frontline leaders can confidently lead their teams through the change, not just be a messenger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then lastly, for momentum to continue, I recognize progress publicly and often, right? Accelerates, people, when momentum is going, people feel supercharged when they are recognized. So making sure to take those opportunities to say thank you and to say, hey, this is because of this person. At the end of the day, it's people understand it, they trust the leadership, and they're walking alongside leadership through the change.
A lot of powerful lessons in terms of change management. Thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
If there is one piece of advice that you could give to another RCM leader or a CFO who's tackling similar challenges, what would it be?
Use your resources. And by that, I don't mean just your internal team members, right? Use those people that you sit alongside of. So like in my particular position, use the vice presidents around you to poke holes in, what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Bring an idea to another VP that maybe doesn't know your role and doesn't know your department all that well, and talk to them about what it is that you want to do and you're trying to do, and let them give you ideas of where you might have a blind spot. I've learned a lot joining TriHealth about myself, because we do a lot in building our leaders to be very self-aware. And so one of the things we talk a lot about is what's your blind spot? And having that awareness helps you to see it before it happens.
That's awesome. Powerful lesson again. Thanks, Kim. One last question to close out today's episode. Is there a recent book, podcast, a framework, or it could even be like an Amazon Prime video, something interesting that you watched in any channel that has really influenced your leadership thinking in the last 1 or 2 years?
There's so many. I used to joke with my former teammates that I have the attention span of a gnat because I have to read like 3 books at the same time because I'll get bored with one. So I'll read a chapter or two and then I go to a different book and I read a chapter or two. But one of the books that I read, and I think it's been in the past 3 years, and I read it cover to cover and I've read it 3 times. It's Randy Fox's Silver Platter Service. And the reason this one is so impactful to me is because as we think about revenue cycle and we think about our roles from a financial perspective, there's a lot of pressure, and we typically see in industry a lot of no, I can't, no, I won't, oh, I've always done it this way. And reading Randy Fox's Silver Platter Service, it talks a lot about customer service, right? And what does that really mean? And really grounding in the fact that from a revenue cycle perspective, our customers are not just our patients. They are physicians, they are clinicians, they are other teammates. It's everybody in the organization. And helping to ground in the fact that really and truly our number one goal should be customer service helps us to remember why we do what we do.
That's a really powerful lesson. Great lesson to close the episode today. Kim, just for a moment, thinking through the conversation over the last 35 to 40 minutes, there were so many nuggets of amazing leadership advice for our audience. So thank you so much for joining this episode and sharing all these wonderful pieces of information. To our audience, please stay tuned. We'll be back with another episode in a few weeks. With that, our heartfelt thanks to Kim for joining us on the episode today. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
You're listening to the RC Executive Lounge Podcast, the show where healthcare revenue leaders share real-world strategies, hard-earned lessons, and bold ideas shaping the future of revenue cycle. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not constitute endorsement of any specific product or solution.